first of all,
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, we started our conversation yesterday going through a timeline of the day, right? We knew there was this call with Trudeau. We knew he was having a call with Mexico. Somewhere in there was a meeting with Tom Homan, the border czar. And then at 3 o'clock, this pronouncement of a pause. I guess people are wondering what happened, what was said that caused this 30-day reprieve?
Wouldn't we all like to know? And we should, I wish we were flies on the wall for that conversation. Look, I think obviously there was some hope within the Canadian government when the Mexican president announced earlier in the day that Mexico would be getting this 1 month reprieve. And she talked about sending 10,000 soldiers to the border. I think people were wondering here whether Canada would have the capacity for that. And then, as you mentioned, Prime Minister Trudeau spoke twice with President Trump yesterday. So, it's difficult to know what was presented or how it was presented to the U.S. officials or Mr. Trump to make it feel like Canada had been doing more. It's sort of been pointed out, look, they announced this border plan already. They talked about the need to strengthen the border and to patrol the border. Kind of the only real new element that people saw in Canada's announcement yesterday was this announcement of a fentanyl czar. Was that enough for Mr. Trump, or was this just a negotiating tactic all along? I don't know that we'll ever really know, Anne-Marie, but I do think people are talking here that the threat is not over, right? We have this 30-day reprieve. Mr. Trump has shown that he can wield tariffs to sort of get what he wants. And so I think Canada is preparing for that. And we are still going to see advocacy from the Canadian government, from premiers who are going to Washington next week to sort of advocate for the Canada-U.S. relationship. So what was the final tipping point? I'm not sure that we'll ever get into the mind of Mr. Trump, but I think you can see that I don't think he'll hesitate to kind of make such threats again and make his comments about taking over essentially the Canadian economy and Canadian sovereignty.
There's the public concessions that we know about. There's the ones that haven't been made public, so we don't know what those are yet. But we do know we have 30 days. And in that time, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is repeating his calls for Parliament to resume immediately. But here's my question. Do they need to? Can the Prime Minister implement these concessions, these plans, without Parliament?
The Prime Minister has said he could, and when he announced his tariff plan this weekend, he said, Canada would hit back initially with $30 billion in counter tariffs. That was presented as something that he did not need to recall Parliament for, that this could be initiated. We know that the Public Safety Minister, for instance, will be at the Manitoba border today, kind of examining how fentanyl is detected and looking at a helicopter that patrols the border. These kinds of actions, I think, sending a signal to the U.S. You don't need Parliament to do that. I suppose kind of the question is, though, is that right? Should Parliament be there debating? Should we have our elected officials who represent Canadians? They're voicing the concerns of constituents, having debates, sharing ideas. Mr. Poilievre, I think, is trying to present himself in more of a leadership role. He's obviously, the attention has really been on Canada-U.S. relations and Mr. Trump. He hasn't been able to get a lot of airtime for kind of some of his concerns, even though he's still leading in the polls. He's trying to present, okay, this is my border plan. We need a tax cut to prepare for this. We need greater interprovincial trade. And so I do think he will continue to push for that, and the government will have to answer questions and explain why Parliament remains prorogued and we can't have this open debate by our parliamentarians.
Laura, I want to jump ahead because it's important to ask this question, although it'd be interesting to sit and dig around what's going to happen in federal politics. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has walked back his announcement yesterday of this cancellation of a $100 million contract with Starlink in response to the tariff pause. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, is also an advisor to Trump. I want to ask you, too, about Premier Ford's comments yesterday. There's a lot being made of this hot mic situation, but if I saw the clip correctly, you asked him directly in the press conference his feelings on President Trump. What did he say then?
I did. I asked if he was still a Trump supporter, and he's been documented to have been in the past. He talked about, wanting the right side to win. And he said point blank, absolutely not, and he was kind of open about the fact that he had supported him in the past, but he's seen how President Trump has kind of treated as his closest friend and ally. I think, this hot mic where he talks about having wanted Mr. Trump to win and then Mr. Trump kind of stabbed him in the back is essentially what he said. I don't think it was fundamentally different than his public comments. Which were, he was open about wanting Trump to win. His opponents are critical of that and said, look, Mr. Trump has for a long time threatened tariffs against other countries. How could you have supported him going into this campaign? And then, now that the Starlink contract is presumably back on, there's going to be hard questions about why is Ontario doing business with Elon Musk, seeing as the way that the U.S. administration has been treating the province. So I think these are all kind of bubbling beneath the surface of this election campaign, which is happening in the midst of all of this kind of upheaval in Canada-U.S. relations. And Mr. Ford is being heavily criticized by his opponents of having this campaign in the middle of this and facing questions about whether he could actually still run the government, and he says he can. So we'll see, how much more he can take from criticism from his opponents and others who say we shouldn't even be in this campaign.
We have the U.S. tariff back and forth. We have a provincial election campaign in Ontario. We have a Liberal leadership race that's on right now. We have a looming federal election. I know we call it This Week in Politics, but really we could call it Today in Politics. I feel like we could talk to you every day. Laura Stone, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.